Welcome back, everybody. Now I'm very pleased to introduce our guests, showrunner, executive producer, and writer Matthew B. Roberts, Caitriona Balfe, who of course plays Claire Fraser and who has been Golden Globe nominated 4 times for this role, and the Critics' Choice Award nominated Sam Heughan, who you'll all know very well as Jamie Fraser. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
What an intense episode this was. I have to admit, I did have to look away a couple of times. It was some hard going. Now, Matthew, I know you partnered with Rain, the sexual assault hotline, for this episode. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to do that and how helpful that was in navigating the scenes with Claire's abduction?
Well, we knew we were going to do this episode from the very beginning of the season, and we wanted to be very careful with it. So when Tony Grappia and I started writing, we started doing as much research as we possibly could. We have in the past on Outlander, as we know, we've dealt with rape and sexual assault and many kinds of assaults on the show. So we have a lot of consultants that we can go to. Over the past 6 years that we've been doing this, we've had a lot of consultants that we've talked to and really mine their expertise before we even start the process.
Absolutely. And Caitriona, how much did you kind of get from that partnership with Rain, and were they supportive, helpful in some way? Did you learn from them at all?
Hugely. I mean, I think anytime you tackle the issue of sexual violence or rape, you want to do it the most responsible way that you possibly can. And I think something that we've always done on Outlander is try to take a point of view and highlight something that can be somewhat helpful in terms of starting a conversation. I mean, when we did season 1, the idea of male rape, which was so unusual to see on TV, and with this particular storyline, when Matt came to talk to us about it and started talking about the idea of disassociation, which is also something that you don't often see when rape is being handled. So we talked a lot with Rain about how we could approach this, and also just in terms of making sure that we had trigger warnings before the episode. So you never want to do something like this and not give people the opportunity to kind of go into it with their eyes open and know what they're going to see. And I think it's really important to all of us when we approach any kind of subject matter like this, that we do it in the most responsible way possible.
Mm-hmm. And for both you and Sam, I have an audience member question from Mitch. The scenes are so emotional in this episode. Do you need time to recover? How do you handle those?
I'll let Caitriona answer that one.
First? I definitely think when you're dealing with really heavy subject matter, you do go to quite dark places within yourself, and I think there's always a certain amount of purging of it that you have to do. But I think the healthiest way to be able to do this job is to also be able to leave these things at the door when you leave during the day. I think using your own psyche and mining your own emotions can be, if you're not careful, you can do yourself psychological damage. So I think it's important early on, and when you do this job, that you learn how to separate your own life and your life at work. I mean, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think we have such a safe environment. I think all credit to Matt and to Tony and to our amazing director Jamie Payne, who dealt with this with great sensitivity and gave I think a really safe platform for us to explore these themes. And I think when you have this community, when you have this close-knit group of people working closely together, I think therefore we can open up more and we can explore these things deeper. So yeah, credit to everyone that was involved in these. I think if it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be able to maybe go to those more challenging places.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, I was so curious about the sort of disassociation scenes where we see Claire and Jamie in this sort of 60s, 70s house with this music and the kind of super bright colors. Tell me how that all came together for you.
Well, it started at the beginning of the season when we break out the entire season. We knew where we wanted to end, and we wanted to end with this particular event. And we talked to Tony and I talked about how to really what we wanted to do is give an escape for both the character and the audience, but we wanted it to be a survival technique. And what we did is we did a ton of research about this, and we found out that people who suffer traumas, it's not only sexual assault, it's all kinds of traumas, that they disassociate with what's going on in front of them as a survival technique. And we started to break the story, and I went to Kat and Sam in, I believe it was Caitriona's trailer one day, and told them about the idea. And I think they, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think they really liked the idea. And I think Caitriona, if I remember correctly, didn't want to shy away from the assault. And we dug into it even more when we talked to them about it. And I think what we tried to do, and then well, Jamie Payne came on board as our director, and we wrote out the 60s. We had to pick a time period so Gary Steele and Trisha Bigger could design it. We couldn't just arbitrarily say she disassociates. So we had to pick a period, and we decided what she came back from, but we didn't want it to be specific. So I asked them both to mess it up. And if you watch the episode, you'll notice that there are pieces in one scene in the what we call dream escapes that are messed up. So there'll be objects in one scene that aren't there anymore. And if you look at young Ian's uniform, he has wampum beads instead of military ribbons. So we decided to really, because Claire was in such a state, she wasn't imagining this as a perfect place. It was just her escape to get away from. And it was a team effort amongst everybody. I think everybody brought their best to this one. We spent a lot of time doing a lot of meetings with Jamie. I met with Jamie on the weekends. Kat and Sam brought a lot to the table, and I had ideas about what it would look like and how it would feel. We wrote out a bunch of dialogue for it, and it really, over the shooting, it just got trimmed down. So to really what it is, and then when we got to editing, we even trimmed it down even more. So it was a really big team effort, and everybody from every designer and the crew and all the cast really dug in on this one, and I'm very proud of it.
Mm-hmm. Talking about these incredible sets, I know we were chatting a little bit about it before this panel began. And I actually had an audience question from Laurie about this. This is the last season for your production designer, John Gary Steele, and he created every set that we've seen over the years. It must be really hard to say goodbye, one of the Outlander family. Do you have a favorite set that you recall, and why? That's for everyone.
Sam?
I know, we've just had this discussion, so I know what you guys are going to answer be. So mine's going to be slightly different, but mine would be the Great Hall season 1, Castle Leoch. It's just I remember it because it was such an impact on me, as sort of just seeing the dedication and detail that he put into it. I mean, he had taken castings, I believe, from the local castle, Doon Castle, and then recreated this hall, and the chandeliers were stag's heads, and there was just so many amazing little details. The sawdust and the dirt on the ground, and then of course everything gets completely destroyed after 4 weeks of filming or whatever it is. So it just was overwhelming, and that was the first impression of Gary's work. But to be honest, every time he's kind of increased the bar, and he's just outdone himself, and he's going to be a great loss. But he was a remarkable man to work with.
Yeah, it's so hard to choose.
What was yours?
I mean, God, I mean, there's such an embarrassment of choices, but I actually Master Raymond's Apothecary in France in season 2 was incredible. It's just, I mean, I think the thing with Gary and all of his work is how much it helps us in our work. And you would go on to any set and just the attention to detail and all of those little things that just make the world so alive and so available to you. So much of your work of imagination of putting yourself in a place is already done.
Yeah. One of the things that Gary and his team used to do is, you know, you could go into a drawer and the drawer would be filled with things, or a cupboard and it would be filled with things. And his mindset is, I don't know where the actors are going to go. I don't know what they're going to do. And I want, if they go to a drawer, there should be something in it. If they go to a cupboard, there should be something in it. And that's just, like Kat said, that's the attention to detail. I mean, if you look at, for me, you know, the Star Chamber jumps out as in just, it's a work of art. And it's just so sad to tear it down. We wish we would kept it up forever. But it really is walking into that for the first time. You looked at it when it was fully lit. You were in awe. But you know, the Boston apartment, it was just amazing with the detail. The French where Jamie and Claire lived in France was stunning. You know, you had the brothel, you have Wilmington streets, you have the Paris streets that they designed. So the list, like Kat said, the list goes on and on and on. And I think for a lot of us, every time we walked onto a new set, it's not that you forgot the old sets, but you went, wow, you outdid yourself. And that was one thing that Gary did. We always wanted to do this for the audience and for the cast, is to give them that new world. So when they reach the new world, you're in it, whether it be Paris or the Caribbean or the New World. When we went down to South Africa, Gary redid Jamaica for everybody, and the ships. I mean, the detail was crazy. So kudos to Gary and his entire team. So he will be.
And actually, just as an actor, you know, going on set, as you said, Matt, like, you felt at home there. You know, you maybe had only just been there, and you instantly have to pretend this is where you've spent, you know, a lot of time, and you just felt at home because of all those details. And he also brought a lot of the characters, I guess, individual characters into certain elements of the sets as well. I mean, you know, Claire's surgery and all these places. I mean, they had so much detail. So yeah, we were very lucky to work with them.
I really loved the whole medical side of things that we saw Claire doing this season. Caitriona, I'm told that you got quite into it with the research and understanding it. Is that the case? Like, what was it like? And can you now do surgery?
She's practicing now, aren't you?
Yeah.
At home.
I've joined the front lines of the NHS. No,
yes, essential worker.
Definitely cut off.
I had a stomach ache one day, and she actually wanted to take out my appendix. It was just, you know.
I don't know why you didn't let me.
I know.
Straight away. Yeah.
No, it's one of the elements that I do find really fascinating. I mean, it's amazing what they have on YouTube and how many different procedures you can watch. Or I remember when we did like Jenny's breech birth in season 1, I just fell down a YouTube hole for a couple of hours watching all of these breech births and people turning babies inside the stomach. But no, it's really fascinating. And I love that this season we got to see Claire really, you know, kind of invest all that time again in her role as a healer and a doctor and a surgeon. And you know, her sort of fight to first of all, discover or rediscover penicillin or cultivate penicillin, I suppose. You know, I think it's fascinating. I think it's something it's an interesting element of our show where you have this person who has all of this foreknowledge of medical procedures from the future and gets to implement them, but yet has to constantly battle with how much she can show her hand, because it's also so dangerous. And as we see at the end of the season, you know, it really costs her. But it's yeah, it's an element of the show I really enjoy.
Mm. And Sam, you know, it was really hard to see Jamie this season because he's such a man of honor and integrity. Like that's his whole identity, you know. And you see him so torn in this season. You know, he's putting on the red coat. He loses his beloved Myrta, and is unable to protect Claire. And you have to have all this emotion that is bubbling beneath the surface. How did you get in that headspace of all that kind of contained rage and pain and everything that he goes through?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the Myrta storyline, excuse me, was, you know, it's not a part of Diana Gabaldon's books, but I think for me and for Jamie, this is like one of the strongest storylines we've had for him for a while, because this dichotomy he's in, you know, he is a man of honor. He's, you know, Myrta's of his blood, and I think, you know, Jamie's losing a part of himself there. He's losing a part of his connection to Scotland, his father figure, you know, his confidant, someone that's been there from the beginning. And I know we've all loved working not only with Duncan Lacroix, who just is, you know, one of the greats of great characters of Outlander, but his character as well, you know, was a really fortuitous kind of storyline that I think also brought the regulator story. It kind of brought it home to the viewer as well. You know, it really put a sort of face to the two sides and the dichotomy that Jamie was in. And then, of course, you know, at the end, you know, sort of seeing Red Jamie kind of, yeah, just doing everything, going to battle for Claire, I think was again, just another great storyline. And I think that's what the great thing about Outlander is, that we have these huge emotional arcs, we have huge stories, and each season it seems to get, you know, more complicated and more involved. But it's great, you know, it's a gift to us from the writers and from Diana.
You know, I do wonder, you guys have played these roles for, you know, 6 years or so now.